So I've been on a bit of a walk this morning, and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the sort of forest now. It's so quiet, it's beautiful here. I'll show you. And maybe this is common in Sweden to find places where you just can't hear anything, you can't see anyone, it's just pure nature. But it's not so common in the UK. So I just really appreciate it and grateful for it. But what has been coming to me on this little walk is something that my teacher Mooji says. He says this: there is nothing you need in order to be yourself. There is nothing you need to do to be yourself, but there is something you need to recognize in order to stop being what you are not. Again, there's nothing you need to do to be yourself, but there is something you need to recognize in order to stop being what you are not. I find this a really powerful pointer, because what it's saying is that we are already the self. We are already that which we're seeking, yet because of false identity, because of joining our sense of self with the false self, then there's something that we need to recognize in order to stop doing that. Because until we recognize something else, we can't do other than identify with the false. How can we? So what is it that we need to recognize in order to stop being what we are not? And this is where the power of observation comes in. The power of being able to witness and just recognize that actually there's something here that is always observing. There's never a moment where we're not observing. And the first stage, if you like, is to come to that point where you recognize there is always something that is observing. The second stage is to begin to look at what is that is observing. And when you look for that, what do you find? And if you find anything, if you find something which has form or substance or energy or vibration or whatever you find that has form, however subtle that might be, something also is seeing that. So in that way we get pushed back on ourselves, push back, until we recognize that what is observing is formless, meaning we can't find it as an object, and yet it is undeniably happening. And this recognition has a huge impact on our sense of identity, because then we're no longer a kind of separate individual who is trying to observe, or is trying to meditate, or is trying to do spiritual practice, or is trying to be more loving or more patient or more kind, or whatever it might be. All of that has its place, but in the context of what I'm speaking about now, we recognize that there is something beyond all of that. There's something beyond all spiritual practice, and it is already here. And yet we miss it the moment we move. The moment we move from it, we miss it. And yet through the pointings, through the teachings, And through just having this sincerity of observing, we begin to recognize that what we truly are cannot be found as an object. And within the light of that recognition, there is just the kind of marinating in that, the resting as that, the abiding as that. In that self-abiding, what happens then is that the mind recognizes that there's something greater than it. The mind recognizes its own source. And in the mind recognizing its own source, the mind is then transformed into what we might call the sattvic mind, or the enlightened mind, the awake mind. So yeah, this pointing, there is nothing we need to do in order to be ourselves, but there is something we need to recognize in order to stop being what we are not. Write it down if you want, and just contemplate it. What do we need to recognize in order to stop being what we are not?